You're 3 weeks from the finish line. After 2 years, you're finally selling your condo. The papers are signed, the buyer is happy, the money is almost in your account. And then, out of nowhere, an HOA management company you've barely heard from decides to blow it all up over a deadbolt. A deadbolt that cost $14 at Home Depot. A deadbolt your buyer has already told you he's throwing straight into the trash. This is the story of how a power-tripping HOA management company tried to shake down a condo seller for $200 with zero proof right before closing, and how it backfired. Meet Marcus. Marcus is 38, a software developer, methodical, patient, the kind of guy who reads every line of a contract before signing it. He bought his condo 6 years ago. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his. A 2-bedroom unit in a mid-rise complex in Northern Virginia. Managed, or mismanaged, by Pinnacle Property Solutions, the HOA's third-party management firm. Marcus never had major issues with the HOA. He paid his dues on time, he didn't park in the wrong spot, he didn't blast music at 2 a.m. He was, by every measure, a model resident. 2 years earlier, when he had replaced the front deadbolt after a lockout incident, he'd grabbed whatever was available at the hardware store, a brushed bronze finish. It looked fine to him. He'd never heard a word about it from anyone. Until now. In early spring, Marcus accepted an offer on the condo from a buyer named Derek, a first-time homeowner, young, excited, and completely unaware of what was about to happen to him. The closing was set for 3 weeks out. Everything was on track. Marcus started packing boxes. He was already mentally living somewhere else. Then, his phone buzzed. His agent, Sandra, explained it in a single sentence. The HOA management company contacted your buyer directly. They told Derek you've been in violation for 2 years and have multiple unpaid fines. Marcus stopped pacing. What violations? Your deadbolt is the wrong color. It's supposed to be brushed nickel. Yours is bronze. Marcus looked at his front door. He stared at it for a long moment. Sandra, has anyone ever told me about this? Did I get a letter? An email? Silence on the other end. They say you were notified multiple times. Marcus laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. In 6 years, he had received exactly 2 pieces of official communication from Pinnacle, a welcome packet and an annual due statement. That was it. He immediately emailed Pinnacle. Politely, professionally, he asked them to produce any and all evidence of prior notifications, emails, certified letters, portal messages, anything. The response? Silence. A full 48 hours of silence. Marcus sent a second email, then a third. Nothing. When Pinnacle finally responded, it was not with documentation. It was with a payment link. $200, due before closing. Here's where things got worse, much worse. Because Pinnacle hadn't just contacted Marcus's agent, they had gone directly to Derek, the buyer, and essentially told him his seller was a repeat violator who had been ignoring fines for 2 years. Derek, who was buying his first home, panicked. He didn't know that HOA fines were common. He didn't know that sellers often handle these at closing. What he heard was, the man selling me this condo has been breaking the rules for 2 years and won't pay for it. Derek called his agent. His agent called Sandra. Sandra called Marcus. And the deal that had been smooth and simple suddenly felt like it was standing on ice. To save the sale, Marcus made a concession he hadn't planned on making. He agreed to absorb a special assessment coming later in the year, something Sandra had originally planned to negotiate as a shared cost. Just like that, several $100s walked out of his pocket. All because Pinnacle went around him. But Marcus still had the fine to deal with. He wasn't going to pay it without proof. That felt wrong on every level. Legally, logically, morally. He pushed back with Pinnacle directly. I need documentation of the prior notifications before I agree to pay any fine. Pinnacle's response was breathtaking in its audacity. Marcus read that sentence 3 times. They were claiming he had been notified, but they couldn't produce a single piece of evidence. No email, no letter, no portal notification, nothing. And their position was, pay anyway. He then did something that surprised even him. He painted the deadbolt. The same evening he found out about the violation, he bought a can of brushed nickel spray paint, taped off the hardware, and carefully repainted it. 45 minutes of work. Done. He sent Pinnacle photos. The violation has been remedied. Please confirm the fine is waived. The next morning, Pinnacle replied. Marcus took a long breath. Let's pause here, because this is the part that makes even lawyers raise an eyebrow. Marcus called Derek directly. They had a civil conversation, and Derek confirmed what Marcus already knew. The moment he moved in, that deadbolt was going in the trash. He had already ordered a smart lock from Amazon. So Pinnacle was demanding that Marcus pay $200 and physically replace a deadbolt, one that would be thrown away within 72 hours of closing. Marcus did the math. Replacement deadbolt, $40. Installation, $80 to a locksmith. Fine, $200. Total cost, over $320 for a piece of hardware that was going in a dumpster. And for what? Because a lock was the wrong shade of metallic for 2 years? 2 years during which not a single documented complaint had been made. But here's the real twist that changed the game. Marcus, who spent his professional life reading documentation, decided to actually read his HOA's CC&Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that govern the community. He scrolled through the PDF at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, and he found it. Section 7, Paragraph 4. No fine shall be assessed without prior written notice to the unit owner, delivered either by first-class mail to the address of record or via the resident portal. Documentation of such notice shall be retained by the management company for a minimum of 3 years. It was right there, in their own rulebook. Marcus didn't call Pinnacle. He didn't text his agent in a panic. He sat down and wrote an email. The email was 4 paragraphs long. It cited Section 7, Paragraph 4 of the CC&Rs verbatim. It noted that no documentation of prior notification had been produced despite 3 requests. It referenced the HOA's own requirement to retain proof of notice for 3 years. It closed with this. He CC'd the HOA board president, whose email address he had found in the annual meeting minutes, publicly posted on the community website. Then he sent it and went to bed. At 7:43 the next morning, his phone buzzed. It was an email from the HOA board president. Marcus read it twice. Then he poured himself a cup of coffee. 3 weeks later, Marcus sat at a closing table and signed his name 17 times. The $200 fine did not appear in the settlement statement. Derek got his condo. And yes, 3 days after moving in, he installed his Amazon smart lock. The old deadbolt went into a cardboard box destined for the recycling bin. Marcus walked out of the closing with a check he'd earned, a lesson he hadn't expected, and a story he'd tell for years. Sandra, his agent, sent him a bottle of wine. The card said, "Nicely played." Marcus thought about this for a long time afterward. What bothered him wasn't the fine itself, it was the assumption behind it. The assumption that homeowners don't read their own documents, that they'll pay rather than push back, that the threat of a delayed closing is enough to make someone fold. And for a lot of people, it works. Plenty of sellers pay fines they don't owe because the cost of fighting feels higher than the cost of paying. But the rules exist for a reason, and when the people enforcing the rules won't follow the rules themselves, that's when reading the fine print stops being optional. Could this happen in real life? This section is designed to be read in voiceover over a calm, informational visual. Think a simple animated infographic style. 1. What rights does a homeowner normally have? In virtually every U.S. state, HOA bylaws and CC&Rs are enforceable contracts, but they bind the HOA too, not just the homeowner. Most CC&Rs require written notice before a fine can be assessed. This is standard across HOA documents nationwide.
Homeowners generally have the right to dispute fines through a formal hearing process. Many states, including Virginia, Florida, and California, require the HOA to offer this. You have the right to request and receive copies of all documentation related to any violation, including proof of prior notifications.
2. What did the HOA do wrong here? Contacted the buyer directly and running the seller without legal justification. This is at minimum a breach of professional conduct and arguably interference with a real estate contract. Claimed multiple notifications without being able to produce a single one, which under their own CC&Rs means the fine was invalid from the start. Refused to accept a reasonable remedy, repainting the deadbolt, with no documented policy basis. Used the closing timeline as implicit leverage, essentially hoping the seller would pay to make the problem go away.
3. What legal options could exist in a real case?
Formal dispute under the CC&Rs.
Most HOA governing documents include an internal dispute resolution process. Always exhaust this first. State HOA oversight. Many states have agencies or ombudsmen that handle HOA complaints. In Virginia, for instance, the Common Interest Community Board oversees HOA management companies. Small Claims Court. For a $200 fine wrongly assessed and paid, small claims court is a realistic option in most states.
Tortious interference. If the HOA's direct communication with the buyer materially damaged your negotiating position, as it did here, there is a potential claim. This is a higher bar, but the facts arguably supported. Attorney demand letter. In cases involving management companies, a single letter from a real estate attorney often resolves the dispute faster than any other step.
4. The takeaway. HOA management companies count on homeowners not reading the fine print. The moment Marcus opened his CC&Rs and found Section 7.4, the power dynamic shifted entirely. He didn't need a lawyer. He didn't need to threaten a lawsuit. He just needed to know the rules better than the people enforcing them. The lesson isn't that all HOAs are bad. Most operate reasonably. The lesson is that in any dispute, documentation is everything. If they can't show you they told you, they can't prove you knew. And if they can't prove you knew, the fine isn't yours to pay.